2.1. 1.
I think above all we are strong individualists. We want as few rules as possible governing our lives. We are also very hard-working. People here live to work and don't work to live. We are also very optimistic, and we think that if we work hard, we can achieve anything. On the negative side, I think we are extremely materialistic. The measure of success for most people here is money. We are extremely concerned with things, possessions, and the bigger the better. Personally, I think I have inherited the typical optimism and drive, and I'm also an individualist. So I think I'm probably quite typical. But I hope I'm less materialistic than many of my countrymen seem to be.
2.
Generally speaking, I think we're very sociable and easygoing, and we're great storytellers. People are also quite religious and family-oriented. We're also very patriotic. Maybe this is because we're a small country and so many of us live abroad. Historically, there's always been a lot of emigration. Weaknesses? I think we can be very melancholic and nostalgic. You only have to listen to our music to hear this. It's often quite sad and slow. It's probably because of our climate and our history. The stereotypical image is that one minute we're laughing and telling you a funny story, and the next minute we're crying into our beer. Which reminds me that we also drink quite a lot. I think I'm quite typical in many respects, although I'm not particularly melancholic.
3.
It's difficult to generalise about us as a people, especially as our big cities now have such a multi-ethnic population, but I would say that we are basically very tolerant and open-minded. We're not nearly as insular as we used to be. We defend the things that we believe in, when we have to, and we avoid taking extreme positions, which I think is another strength. One of our main weaknesses, though, is that we can be quite self-satisfied and arrogant towards foreigners. Just think of our inability or our unwillingness to learn foreign languages. I'd also say that we can be lazy, and we're a bit careless about the way we dress, and also we drink too much. I don't think I'm very typical, though I do definitely have one of the weaknesses, but I'm not going to say which.
4.
As a nation, we're very proud of our identity and our cultural heritage. We're an inventive people, but we often feel marginalised and forgotten by our bigger neighbour, England that is. We're very sociable and like to have a good time. We're also great travellers, and people often compliment us on the good behaviour of our sports fans abroad. On the other hand, we do have a tendency to melancholy. Maybe it's something to do with the weather. We tend to think that life is hard. There's also a negative attitude towards our neighbour, and this can range from humorous comments to actual violence. And although we're keen travellers, we can be quite negative towards foreigners. Some people would like to see the country kept only for us, without apparently understanding how negative that could be. I don't think of myself as a typical example. I love the country and think it has some of the most beautiful scenery in the world, but I feel that we tend to focus too much on the wrongs done to us in the distant past, rather than trying to move on.
2.2. 1. A.
We think that if we work hard, we can achieve anything.
B.
I think I have inherited the typical optimism and drive.
2. A.
Historically, there's always been a lot of emigration.
B.
It's probably because of our climate and our history.
3. A.
It's difficult to generalise about us as a people, especially as our big cities now have such a multi-ethnic population.
B.
Just think of our inability or our unwillingness to learn foreign languages.
4. A.
There is also a negative attitude towards our neighbour.
B.
I feel that we tend to focus too much on wrongs done to us in the distant past.
2.3.
Ooh.
loose, suit. Put on, woolen. Linen, slippers. High-heeled, sleeveless. Collar, sandals. Fur, shirt. Lycra, striped. Plain, suede.
2.4. Song. Englishman in New York.
I don't take coffee, I take tea, my dear. I like my toast done on one side, and you can hear it in my accent when I talk. I'm an Englishman in New York. See me walking down Fifth Avenue, a walking cane here at my side. I take it everywhere I walk. I'm an Englishman in New York. Oh, I'm an alien. I'm a legal alien. I'm an Englishman in New York. Oh, I'm an alien. I'm a legal alien. I'm an Englishman in New York. If manners maketh man, as someone said, he's our hero of the day. It takes a man to suffer ignorance and smile. Be yourself, no matter what they say. Oh, I'm an alien. I'm a legal alien. I'm an Englishman in New York. Oh, I'm an alien. I'm a legal alien. I'm an Englishman in New York. Modesty, propriety, elite to notoriety. You could end up as the only one. Gentleness, sobriety, a rare in this society. At night a candle's brighter than the sun. Takes more than combat gear to make a man. Takes more than a license for a gun. Confront your enemies, avoid them when you can. A gentleman will walk but never run. If manners maketh man, as someone said, he's our hero of the day. It takes a man to suffer ignorance and smile. Be yourself, no matter what they say. 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 Be yourself, no matter what they say.
2.5. 1.
I thought he'd caught that flight. I saw him checking in.
2.
The hotel was built in 1950. The date was written above the door.
3.
The company had become successful since it won the prize for Best Airline.
4.
I flew to Mexico City. I knew the city very well.
5.
She read for a while before she fell asleep. Then she dreamt about her childhood.
6.
We'd flown from New York that day. We'd chosen a bad day to travel.
7.
I heard that they'd been hurt in the accident, but they weren't.
8.
She said she'd paid for the train with money she'd taken from my wallet.
2.6. Part 1.
With me in the studio today I have two pilots, Richard and Stephen, who are going to answer some of the most frequently asked questions about flying and air travel. Hello to both of you.
Hello.
Hello.
Right. The first question is, what weather conditions are the most dangerous when flying a plane?
Well, probably the most dangerous weather conditions are when the wind changes direction very suddenly. This tends to happen during thunderstorms and typhoons, and it's especially dangerous during takeoff and landing. But it's quite unusual. I've been flying for 37 years now, and I've only experienced this 3 or 4 times.
Is all turbulence dangerous?
No, in fact, it's not normally dangerous. Pilots know when to expect turbulence, and we try to avoid it by changing routes or flight levels.
Which is more dangerous, takeoff or landing?
Both takeoff and landing can be dangerous. They're the most critical moments of a flight. Pilots talk about the critical 8 minutes, the 3 minutes after takeoff and the 5 minutes before landing. Most accidents happen in this period.
I would say takeoff is probably slightly more dangerous than landing. There is a critical moment just before takeoff when the plane is accelerating, but it hasn't yet reached the speed to be able to fly. If the pilot has a problem with the plane at this point, he has very little time, maybe only a second, to abort the takeoff.
Passengers often think that putting on seat belts in a plane is really a waste of time. Is that true?
Not at all. When the plane is moving on the ground and the pilot suddenly puts the brakes on, passengers can be thrown out of their seats, just like in a car.
Yes.
But more importantly, during the flight, if there is sudden and severe turbulence, you could be thrown all over the cabin if you aren't wearing your seatbelt. That's why airlines usually recommend you wear your belt even when the seatbelt light is off.
Should we really listen to the safety information?
It's definitely worth listening to the information about emergency exits. If there's a fire on a plane, it may be dark and the plane will be full of smoke and fumes. So listening to where the exits are and working out which one is the nearest exit to you might save your life. Most aircrew can even tell you where the emergency exits are in the hotels where they stay.
What about life jackets?
Fortunately, planes very rarely have to land in the sea. But to be honest, the chances of surviving if your plane did crash into the sea are not high.
Are some airports more dangerous than others?
Yes, some are. Particularly airports with high mountains around them, and airports in countries with older or more basic navigational equipment.
For some difficult airports, like, let's say, Kathmandu, they only allow very experienced pilots to land there. And for some of these airports, pilots have to practice on a simulator first, before they are given permission to land a plane there.
How important is it for pilots and controllers to have good, clear English?
Oh, it's the official language of the air, so obviously it's vital for pilots and controllers to have good English. To be honest, it doesn't always happen.
And apart from people's English not being good, some countries don't respect the convention and don't force their pilots to speak in English. But most of them do, luckily.
2.7. Part 2.
Have you ever had a problem with a famous person as a passenger?
I've carried a lot of famous people, and they are usually very well behaved. But I remember once I had the actor Steven Seagal as a passenger, and the cabin crew told me that he had just got on board and he was carrying an enormous samurai sword. Weapons aren't allowed on board, of course, so I had to go and speak to him. He looked very imposing standing in the cabin. He was nearly 2 meters tall, dressed completely in black, carrying a sword, and he is, as you probably know, a martial arts expert. But in fact, he was very happy to give us the sword. which was gold, and which had been given to him as a present in Bali.
What's your most frightening experience as a pilot?
Crossing the road outside the airport terminal. That's certainly the most dangerous thing I do. Probably in connection with flying, my most frightening experience would have to be a near miss I had when I was flying a Boeing 747 at night. A small aeroplane passed in the opposite direction, just 15 metres below my plane. Just after this happened, a flight attendant brought us some hot snacks, and I distinctly remember how good they tasted.
Have you ever been taken ill during a flight?
Once I was flying from Hong Kong to London. That's a 13-hour flight, and I got food poisoning after 6 hours. I felt terrible, incapable of doing anything at all for the rest of the flight. Luckily, though, the rest of the crew were fine, because on all flights the crew are given different meals just in case. So, as my co-pilots had eaten a different meal and felt fine, the flight was able to continue safely.
2.8. 1.
Oh.
2.
What's happened?
Let's back up, you know.
What?
3.
Can I see your boarding pass?
Oh, my God. I've lost it. Where is it? Where is it?
I'm afraid you can't fly if you haven't got your boarding pass.
Oh, thank God. It's in my pocket.
4.
Tom, this is Andrea. Oh, but of course you two know each other, don't you?
Actually, we've only met once, so not really. Hi, Andrea.
5.
I can't see a thing. I think we'd better stop for a bit.
6.
Excuse me, please, could you tell me how to get to the train station?
Yeah, mate. Straight down the high street, left of the lights, straight through the underpass, then it's right in front of you.
2.9.
Absolutely. Actually. Almost. Apparently. Definitely. Especially. Even. Fortunately. Ideally. Incredibly. Luckily. Unfortunately.
2.10. 1.
There was a lot of traffic and unfortunately we arrived extremely late.
2.
We definitely want to go abroad this summer, ideally somewhere hot.
3.
It's incredibly easy. Even a child could do it.
4.
I thought he was Portuguese, but actually he's Brazilian.
5.
You said they'd already gone, but apparently they're still here.
6.
I absolutely love Italian food, especially pizza.
2.11. Little Brother by Bruce Holland Rogers.
Peter had wanted a little brother for 3 Christmases in a row. His favorite TV commercials were the ones that showed just how much fun he would have teaching little brother to do all the things that he could already do himself. But every year, Mommy had said that Peter wasn't ready for a little brother. Until this year. This year, when Peter ran into the living room, there sat little brother among all the wrapped presents, babbling baby talk, smiling his happy smile, and patting one of the packages with his fat little hand. Peter was so excited that he ran up and gave little brother a big hug around the neck. That was how he found out about the button. Peter's hand pushed against something cold on little brother's neck, and suddenly little brother wasn't babbling anymore, or even sitting up. Suddenly, little brother was limp on the floor, as lifeless as any ordinary doll.
2.12
Peter, Mommy said. I didn't mean to. Mommy picked up little brother, sat him in her lap, and pressed the black button at the back of his neck. Little brother's face came alive, and it wrinkled up as if he were about to cry. But Mommy bounced him on her knee and told him what a good boy he was. He didn't cry after all. Little brother isn't like your other toys, Peter, Mommy said. You have to be extra careful with him, as if he were a real baby. She put little brother down on the floor, and he took tottering baby steps toward Peter. Why don't you let him help open your other presents? So that's what Peter did. He showed little brother how to tear the paper and open the boxes. The other toys were a fire engine, some talking books, a wagon, and lots of wooden blocks. The fire engine was the second best present. It had lights, a siren, and hoses just like the real thing. There weren't as many presents as last year, Mommy explained, because little brother was expensive. That was okay. Little brother was the best present ever. Well, that's what Peter thought at first.
.13
At first, everything that little brother did was funny and wonderful. Peter put all the torn wrapping paper in the wagon, and little brother took it out again and threw it on the floor. Peter started to read a talking book, and little brother came and turned the pages too fast for the book to keep up. But then, while Mommy went to the kitchen to cook breakfast, Peter tried to show little brother how to build a very tall tower out of blocks. Little brother wasn't interested in seeing a really tall tower. Every time Peter had a few blocks stacked up, little brother swatted the tower with his hand and laughed. Peter laughed too, for the first time, and the second. But then he said, "Now watch this time. I'm going to make it really big." But little brother didn't watch. The tower was only a few blocks tall when he knocked it down. "No," Peter said. He grabbed hold of little brother's arm. "Don't!" Little brother's face wrinkled. He was getting ready to cry. Peter looked toward the kitchen and let go. "Don't cry," he said. "Look, I'm building another one. Watch me build it." Little brother watched. Then he knocked the tower down. Peter had an idea.
.14 When Mommy came into the living room again, Peter had built a tower that was taller than he was, the best tower he had ever made. "Look," he said. But Mommy didn't even look at the tower. "Peter!" She picked up little brother, put him on her lap, and pressed the button to turn him back on. As soon as he was on, little brother started to scream. His face turned red. "I didn't mean to." "Peter, I told you, he's not like your other toys. When you turn him off, he can't move, but he can still see and hear. He can still feel, and it scares him." He was knocking down my blocks. Babies do things like that, Mommy said. That's what it's like to have a baby brother. Little brother howled. He's mine, Peter said too quietly for Mommy to hear. But when little brother had calmed down, Mommy put him back on the floor, and Peter let him toddle over and knock down the tower. Mommy told Peter to clean up the wrapping paper, and she went back into the kitchen. Peter had already picked up the wrapping paper once, and she hadn't said thank you. She hadn't even noticed. Peter wadded the paper into angry balls and threw them one at a time into the wagon until it was almost full. That's when little brother broke the fire engine. Peter turned just in time to see him lift the engine up over his head and let it drop.
.15
No! Peter shouted. The windshield cracked and popped out as the fire engine hit the floor, broken. Peter hadn't even played with it once, and his second-best Christmas present was broken. Later, when Mommy came into the living room, she didn't thank Peter for picking up all the wrapping paper. Instead, she scooped up little brother and turned him on again. He trembled and screeched louder than ever. My God, how long has he been off? Peter's mother demanded. I don't like him. Peter, it scares him. Listen to him. I hate him. Take him back. You are not to turn him off again, ever. He's mine, Peter shouted. He's mine, and I can do what I want with him. He broke my fire engine. He's a baby. He's stupid. I hate him. Take him back. You are going to learn to be nice with him. I'll turn him off if you don't take him back. I'll turn him off and hide him someplace where you can't find him. Peter, Mommy said, and she was angry. She was angrier than he'd ever seen her before. She put little brother down and took a step toward Peter. She would punish him. Peter didn't care. He was angry too. I'll do it, he yelled. I'll turn him off and hide him someplace dark. You'll do no such thing, Mommy said. She grabbed his arm and spun him around. The spanking would come next. But it didn't. Instead, he felt her fingers searching for something at the back of his neck.
.16, Part 1.
Hayley Levine is a flight attendant with First Choice Airways. What made you want to be a flight attendant?
I never really wanted to be a flight attendant. I just kind of knew I always wanted to travel. Always had this idea I wanted to see the world. Saw an advert in a newspaper, went for the interview, got the job, and loved it. And it's definitely for me. Definitely.
What kind of training did you have?
In order to become a flight attendant, you have your group interview first, you're singled out, you have a one-on-one interview, and then if you pass that stage, you go on to your training, which is 5 weeks. First week's all about customer service, relations, things like that. And then you go on to all your safety training, which is 4 weeks, intensive training. You know, how to deal with fires, evacuations, water landing, passengers. And then you're quite well trained on immediate care. So, you know, it's quite an important part of our job. If something happens up in the air, something medical, you know, you need to be trained to deal with it quickly,
efficiently.
What kind of person do you think the airlines are looking for? I mean, what kind of person makes a good flight attendant?
I don't know exactly what they're looking for, but I can only think they look for someone who's quite outgoing, someone who's quite can work well in a team. You have to be a certain kind of character to do what we do. I mean, you fly with different people every day. You know, you go into work, anything could happen. There's thousands and thousands of crew. You don't work with the same people. You need to be able to just get on with people that you've never met before, work under pressure sometimes. So I think they're looking for someone who's, you know, quite competent in what they do, quite confident. Just someone who's a team player, really.
Tell me, what do you think are good and bad sides of the job?
Good sides, obviously, I get to see the world pretty much for free. I mean, that's amazing. You couldn't ask for anything more, really. Bad sides, probably sick bags, probably. And obviously, it's really galling on your social life. It's more like a way of living than a job. You know, you have to work around it. So, but yeah, it's good. Wouldn't change it for the world.
Are there any other downsides?
Probably the jet lag, that's quite bad. Definitely, you do suffer a lot, but, you know, it's part of the job, you just sort of get on with it.
Have you got any tips for dealing with jet lag?
Tips? I don't wear a watch, sometimes that helps. And if you're going sort of east, you just try and stay up. Just try and fight the jet lag. It's the best way. I definitely find it easier going east than I do west. I don't know why that is.
2.17, Part 2.
You must come into contact with a lot of passengers who are afraid of flying. How do you deal with this?
A lot of passengers that are afraid of flying. There's not really a lot you can do. Just try and sit and talk to them, calm them down. I think your confidence is sort of always a good booster as well, if they know that you're confident in what you do. I think that helps. Most of them are okay after takeoff. It's just that initial getting into the air, and then they're all right.
How can you tell if someone's scared?
If they're a scared flyer, they do usually let you know, or they walk on shaking so much it's pretty obvious that they're scared of flying. You do feel sorry for them. Everyone's scared of something. So, but yeah, they usually make themselves known. Yeah, or come straight up and ask for vodka. That's when you usually know someone's scared of flying. I did have a guy once though, just before takeoff. And he was really, really scared of flying, and I'd spent a good half an hour with him before the flight, trying to calm him down. And we just got towards takeoff, and he tried to open the emergency exit door. He was having a panic attack. So, yeah, that was probably the worst thing. He didn't want to fly. We got him off. Poor guy. Felt really sorry for him.
Have you ever been in a dangerous situation? For example, have you had to evacuate a plane?
I've never had to evacuate an aircraft, never, and hopefully never will. But we're trained to do that, so, you know, really well trained to do that. But hopefully nothing like that will ever happen. I've never even remotely come close to it, so that's good.
Have you ever felt nervous or frightened on a flight?
No, not really. Never, actually. I think the worst thing's probably a bit of turbulence. But to be honest, that's an excuse to sit down and have a cup of tea. So, you know, no, I've never really felt frightened in the air. I feel really safe up there. Really safe. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it.
2.18. 1.
You need to be trained to deal with it quickly, efficiently.
2.
Just someone who's a team player, really.
3.
Yeah, it's good. Wouldn't change it for the world.
4.
You do suffer a lot, but, you know, it's part of the job. You just sort of get on with it.
5.
Poor guy. Felt really sorry for him.
6.
I feel really safe up there. Really safe. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it.
2.19. 1. Anne.
How do you feel when you fly?
I love it. I really love flying. I like going to different places. Doesn't matter how long it takes. I just love flying.
What do you least like about flying?
The meals on the plane. That's what I don't like about flying.
Have you ever had a frustrating experience when you were flying?
Yes, I did actually last year, but it wasn't actually on the plane. It was beforehand. I had too much luggage at Delhi Airport, and they wouldn't let me on the plane. And they were trying to say that I had to pay a lot of money, but eventually I bribed somebody.
2. Jordan.
How do you feel when you fly?
I love flying. I do.
What do you least like about flying?
I don't like turbulence a lot because when it shakes, it makes me a little nervous. But I like flying because you're isolated and you can't use your cell phone or anything. I like that.
Have you ever had a frustrating experience when you were flying?
Yeah, one time they lost my baggage, so I had to spend my holiday without my luggage.
3. Jeff.
How do you feel when you fly?
Predominantly comfortable. I think it's a state of mind.
What do you least like about flying?
That I'm not in control of the situation that I'm in, that I'm putting my safety in somebody else's hands.
Have you ever had a frustrating experience when you were flying?
Air travel, security-wise, is very frustrating. Not being able to take things on a plane and the huge queues at the airports.
4. Ben.
How do you feel when you fly?
Safe. I mean, I have no problems with travelling at all. Security checks are a bit annoying, but it's kind of necessary evil, I suppose.
What do you least like about flying?
Probably either the leg room or the food. Probably the two worst.
Have you ever had a frustrating experience when you were flying?
Stopover in Chicago for quite a while, a few years ago, but nothing major. No.
2.20. 1.
But it wasn't actually on the plane.
2.
Yeah, one time they lost my baggage.
3.
Air travel, security-wise, is very frustrating.
4.
Nothing major, no.
2.21. 1.
So, what did you get in the end?
Well, I tried on loads of things, but they were either the wrong size or the wrong colour. There was this divine bright blue leather jacket, and it was really reduced, but I could only find a small. And I very nearly got a black cashmere sweater, but then I thought, actually, I've got one just like it already, so I left it. And in the end, I went back to where the jackets were, and I found the blue one in a medium, so I got it. But now, I'm not sure if I'll ever wear it.
2.
Well, I've been here for about 6 months, and I can tell you that the English are a lot stricter about being punctual than we are in Australia. Some English friends of mine asked me to dinner, and I said what time, and they said about 8 o'clock. Well, I didn't want to come too early, because in Australia that's not good manners. So I arrived at about 8:25, and when my friend opened the door, she said, "At last, here you are. We thought you'd got lost." I mean, she made it pretty clear that I was late. Apparently, it's okay to come about 15 minutes later than the time people say, but not more. Strange, huh? Back home, people wouldn't mind at all, would they?
3.
So, what did you think, John?
Well, I have to say that I didn't really enjoy it. In fact, I didn't like it at all. Of course, I know some people love her style, and I quite enjoyed the last one. What was it? The Station Master's Daughter. But that had a good plot. And this one was just all over the place. And it's not that the characters weren't interesting. They were. But as soon as I started to get interested in one of them, they would suddenly disappear and new ones would appear. In the end, I just couldn't work out what was happening.
4.
Air Britannia announces a change of gate for flight AB 578 to Budapest. This flight will now be departing from gate B50.
5.
Excuse me?
Yes?
Do you know if the flight from Santiago has arrived yet?
Yes. It arrived about half an hour ago.
The Iberia one that came via Madrid?
That's right. But it arrived in Terminal 2. This is Terminal 3.
Oh, no. Then I've been waiting in the wrong place. Do you think all the passengers will have come out by now?
It's hard to say. It all depends how long it takes for them to get their luggage and come through customs.
Is there any way you could put a message out in Terminal 2 so that I can let them know I'm coming? Otherwise they might think I'm not here to meet them.
Yes, I can. What are their names?
It's...
2.22.
A lot of people think of us as cold and reserved, and often depressed.
maybe even suicidal. But I don't think this is a good description of us. I suppose it's true that we have a tendency to be rather melancholic, maybe because of our long dark winters. But I don't think our suicide rate is especially high at all. I think the Swedes do take life very seriously, and we are very self-conscious, especially in social situations, so maybe we do sometimes appear to be quite shy and cold when you first meet us. But when you get to know a Swede, I think you will find us to be very friendly and hospitable, even, may I say, warm. I think another very common characteristic of Swedish people is a wish to avoid conflict. It's not a coincidence that the Swedish army has not fought in a war for 200 years. But even in our day-to-day life, we always try to reach agreement with each other. We don't like fighting or arguing. Personally, I think that's a very positive feature of the Swedish personality. I think as a nation we are very patriotic. Maybe because we are such a small country. If you go to Sweden, you will see the Swedish flag everywhere you go, on houses, on the tables in restaurants, even on birthday cakes. We are great nature lovers. We love being in the countryside. In the winter we ski, and in the summer we walk and have picnics. We are also very ecologically minded. We also believe very passionately in protecting the environment. We are very good at recycling and at using cleaner and greener technologies. Oh, and Swedish men are very good in the house. That's something people always think about us. And it's true. It's not uncommon in Sweden for the woman to go out to work and for the man to stay at home, looking after the house and after a young baby. I think I can say that Swedish men are very good at changing nappies.